Back in the year 2001, this is what an Animal Crossing villager looked like, and over the years, the character and the amount of customization and changes you could make to your character has evolved significantly to the point where nowadays, in New Horizons, they can look like this. But how did we get here? Because there are some very interesting and nuanced things from every Animal Crossing game that has changed that is worth taking a look at. And I guess that's what we're doing today, so let's do it. All right, we gotta get our heads back into the mind space of 2001. Pokemon the Movie 3 came out, Techno the robotic puppy was a thing, Beanie Babies were 100% going to pay for my college tuition one day, and in Japan, first Animal Crossing game released for the Nintendo 64 titled Dobutsu no Mori, which translates to Animal Forest, and this game would serve as the basis for the GameCube release that we would see in the West, but there was a pretty big difference with character customization even on this version of the game. Let's dig a little closer. Okay, so customization in the older Animal Crossing games was pretty basic. As far as your character was concerned, the only thing you could really change was your shirt and hat, and they were married together, so whatever your shirt was would be reflected on your hat. Your face and hair color and all of that was actually dictated by how you answered questions on your train ride at the beginning of the game. And I always found these hats a little interesting, like why are they shaped like this if you're a female? And honestly, until I really decided to take a closer look today while we're working on this video, I always thought that the boy character's hat had horns on them, but they're actually not horns. I think it's his hair. Maybe? Is that hair or horns coming through? I actually don't know. Nonetheless, there was a little bit of customization you could do in the original Animal Crossing game where you could at least put on different clothes and that would change your appearance, but Animal Forest for the Nintendo 64 did not have the Able sisters in that game. So there was no option for doing custom designs just yet, so whatever you could buy from Tom Nook's or find in the garbage dump was pretty much all you had as far as character customization was concerned, and you couldn't change your face or change your hair or anything like that. Whatever you got on the first day was what you were stuck with. Also, it's worth noting, boy characters had blue shoes, girl characters had red shoes with like really cool striped socks. Boys, I think, had like green leggings on. Now, things would change a little bit when Animal Crossing would release in the West for the GameCube. It also had releases in Japan for the GameCube as well, and that would add Able sisters, which was a pretty big deal if you think about it, because now you could do custom designs, which opened the door for literally whatever you could imagine, at least being able to cover like your hat and your shirt with. Once again, there wasn't like options to choose between hats and shirts yet. This was all we had, but hey, it was better than the N64 version, technically. Now, of course, another interesting thing that came in from the GameCube era of Animal Crossing was the fact that there were umbrellas as a pretty big customization option, I guess. You could carry an umbrella around. There really wasn't that much to it. But then Animal Crossing in this era also had this interesting tanning mechanic where if you spent a lot of time out in the sunlight during like the summer months, your character would slowly become more and more tanned. I think the intention was you could use the umbrella to mitigate the sunlight if you didn't want your character to be as tan, but it is interesting how this was like a mechanic built into the game. And considering Animal Crossing didn't have options for skin color changes back in the day, this was sometimes the only way some players who had darker color skin in real life would have to try to keep up with this mechanic to have their character at least somewhat reflect how they looked in real life. But yeah, I think the whole tanning mechanic was a little goofy because of like how extreme you could end up getting your tan after a while. I mean, it was great to have options, right? But just like the extreme difference was a little goofy, I think. But I think other people probably agree with me on that one too. Nonetheless, things have gotten better over the years with Animal Crossing and customization when it comes to colors of skin and whatnot, and we'll talk about that, but it took Animal Crossing a long time to address it. It is also worth noting that in the Western release of the game, the character models' eye colors were altered to be a little bit more varied. So some characters would have had black eyes in the original N64 version or the first GameCube Japanese release, but by the time it did come to the West, they would have different eye colors, and this trait would be carried over into the final like ultimate Dobutsu no Mori E+ version that came out only in Japan later on. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting though, because after all of these releases for the first generation of Animal Crossing, it wouldn't be too long before Animal Crossing for Nintendo DS would be announced, before they even added the name Wild World for it. And I remember looking into the screenshots for this game way back in the day when like my family first got a new computer that actually had Windows XP. That was a big deal. I was probably too young to be surfing the internet, but here I was looking up Animal Crossing stuff. But yeah, if you look back at the screenshots that were shown off for pre-release versions of Animal Crossing for the DS before the Wild World name was attached to it, you can see that the characters in this version of the game more closely resemble the way that the characters look over in the previous GameCube GameCube version of the game. The hats are featured once again here, but as we would know, when Animal Crossing Wild World would release, things would be different. For the first time ever, you would be able to take off your hat. So I always do wonder when the decision was made to add more customization to the way that characters could appear in these Animal Crossing games, if it was something that was like a last minute thought, or was it just like a placeholder thing when they were releasing these images early on? Because it is interesting that they would show these images with characters looking like that and not highlight the fact that you could customize your character in these early images. That decision must have come later. But yeah, overall, Animal Crossing in this original generation was pretty basic. I mean, guys wore like a shirt and shorts and girls wore like a dress, and that was pretty much all there was to it. So now let's take a look at Animal Crossing Wild World, which officially released in winter of 2005. Yes, this game was pretty cool. I mean, we had an Animal Crossing experience on the go. Sure, your town was smaller than before, but with those little sacrifices to certain things that the GameCube version had, there was a lot of new additions, and customization really flourished in this one. Like we mentioned, you could finally take off a hat and just, have your hair out there just being the way that you wanted to be. There were other big improvements added as well. For the first time, there was facial accessories that you could actually have, like you could wear glasses, for example. This game also saw the introduction of Shampoodle, essentially a hair salon where the character Harriet would be there and could change out your hairstyle, which was a really, really big addition to the game here. Now, when Harriet was introduced into Animal Crossing Wild World, obviously it wasn't like complete freedom. You still had the little randomness that Animal Crossing games are known for having. You'd have to answer a series of questions from Harriet, and based on how you answered those questions, it would dictate which hairstyle you ended up getting. There were limitations also, like for instance, you could only get your hair done once per day, so if you weren't happy, you'd have to come back, and it cost 3,000 bells, which was a pretty hefty cost for having like your hair done in Animal Crossing, but hey, Harriet had to make money some way or another. With Animal Crossing Wild World, there were 8 different hairstyles for boys and 8 different hairstyles for girls, and depending on how you answered the questions, it would decide which hairstyle you ended up getting. And then on top of that, there were 8 different colors that you could have for your brand new hairstyle. Now, one thing that was really interesting on Animal Crossing Wild World is that if you went to Harriet and you changed out your hairstyle 16 times, which is quite a few times to have to go and do that, you will unlock the ability to get hairstyles from the opposite gender, and Harriet will prompt you ahead of time asking if you want the opposite gender's hairstyle. So there was a way to get the other hairstyles if you wanted to rock that, but there definitely were a lot of hoops that you would have to jump through if you actually wanted to get those hairstyles. Now, while there were some accessories added to Animal Crossing Wild World, like glasses you could wear, there were other things you could also put on in the accessory category, like if you wanted to wear a gas mask or something like that, or some sort of hockey mask. There also were different facial hairs that counted as accessories that you could equip as well, which was a cool option, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. The mini mustache ended up getting censored in European releases of Animal Crossing Wild World, and it ended up looking like this instead. And I think we can probably guess why they ended up choosing to censor the mustache in European releases. I'm actually surprised that other Western releases still had the mustache, I guess. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, just a mustache hairstyle, but like big picture, when there's only one possible mustache accessory in the game and it looks like this, I can understand why they were like a little more critical with their decision to censor it later on. If there was like a huge variety of mustaches and one of them kind of looked like this, okay. But yeah, when there's only one, they got to make it count. And I guess they decided that maybe this wasn't the best look. Now, while Animal Crossing Wild World was the first game to let you not wear a hat if you chose not to, there was a variety of hats that you could wear, and they were all a lot different from what there was in the previous Animal Crossing game. There was actual caps that you could wear. There were hats in the game. There was top hats. There was Mario and Luigi hats. There were the rare feathers, which were like a big accomplishment if you had donated a lot of money to the Boondocks, which was like a whole fundraiser thing that the post office did. Pretty sure it was a scam, but you would get a feather rewarded to you if you did it long enough. And then this game also saw the introduction of the Royal Crown and the Crown, some of the most expensive items in all of Animal Crossing. And yeah, it was a testament to the fact that you're able to make a ton of money if you're able to, play the game long enough to have enough bells to be able to afford afford these crowns. There also was a Viking hat, which eerily looks like the same type of hat from the first Animal Crossing game, which makes me wonder, are those horns or was it hair all along? I don't know. And then of course, umbrellas also make a return here. There's not that many different umbrellas, but there are some, and I guess that's cool. And then of course, just like the previous Animal Crossing game, you could still make custom designs that could then be worn out as like a shirt or a hat. So there was that also going for it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a closer look at Animal Crossing City Folk next. This game was released in 2008, but was kind of criticized for not being different enough from Animal Crossing Wild World. So when it comes to customization, there were some limitations with how far things evolved in between Wild World and City Folk. But nonetheless, City Folk did make some interesting improvements and changes. I mean, I guess kind of. There was some new clothing that was added to the game, so does that count? There was like the whole designer store with Gracie's, and there was some expensive clothes there. And then the other big thing, technically, was the addition of these masks you could wear that would make you look like your Nintendo Mii character. And I don't know, they're kind of terrifying to look at. But this was also during a time where like seeing the Mii characters was like super normal. So it wasn't that far out there, but still, it's a little weird nowadays. Apparently during the development of Animal Crossing City Folk, they even considered just making it where your Mii character was the character that you would play as no matter what. I think that would have been a terrible decision for Animal Crossing, and I'm glad they didn't go through that and they opted for doing the mask thing instead. And while not everybody used the mask, I do think a lot of people tried it out for a little while just because it was a feature back in the Wii days. Also, we talked about this a long time ago, and someone pointed out in my comment section that the Mii masks, at the very least, were an option for players who had darker skin and wanted to like represent themselves more accurately, because at the very least, if you had a Mii skin, you could have your real skin color here. Interestingly enough, though, this feature would just be like a one and done thing. It showed up in Animal Crossing City Folk, it existed, and then by the time another Animal Crossing game would release, it wouldn't exist. So yeah, one of the more exclusive things about Animal Crossing City Folk that you might not have remembered. A big improvement to Animal Crossing City Folk, though, was the introduction of pro designs, which meant you could actually do cool shirt designs that would have different types of customizations. You could change the way that the sleeves looked. So that was a little more than just like a simple design, something that City Folk doesn't get enough credit for. Also, interestingly enough, when it comes to Animal Crossing City Folk, the shoes were altered where you could mix things up and change them a bit. The styles of the shoes were a little bit different. Boys had these type of like loafer shoes and girls had these type of shoes, and you could eventually unlock the ability to talk to Kix and get your shoes to be shined and changed color so that they look different. There was a wide variety of colors actually available, which is pretty cool, but if you actually ended up changing your shoes about 15 to 20 times or so, you would unlock the ability to change and get the shoes from the opposite gender. So if you wanted to rock some red Mary Janes or something and your character was a boy in Animal Crossing, then you could go and do that. And while City Folk was criticized for not having enough new features when it came to the game overall, Animal Crossing New Leaf would absolutely change everything, because Animal Crossing New Leaf added like way more than anything else. Animal Crossing New Leaf was some of the biggest improvements when it came to overall character customization in this game. Now, firstly, right off the bat, when you got to choose the appearance of your character, or not really choose the appearance, but answer questions on a train once again, that would choose how your character would look, there was more variety in how your character would look. For instance, in total, there were 24 different variations you could have for your character upon exiting the train, 12 boy, 12 girl characters. But now look at this. See this here? This is the Animal Crossing New Leaf villager on the screen, and you might notice something. Their legs are a little bit longer than they were in previous Animal Crossing games, because that is right, for the first time ever, pants were introduced into Animal Crossing. What a big day. Not only were pants introduced though, we now got shoes, socks, like things were stepping up in the customization side of Animal Crossing, and New Leaf, rightfully so, kind of takes the crown as one of the biggest jumps in Animal Crossing from a previous game to the game that then came out. And that wasn't where customization stopped for the character creation in New Leaf either. For example, after you were able to like get started in your game, you know, maybe get some cool clothes, you know, some accessories along the way, because they had accessories as well. After a while, when you finally did unlock Shampoodle, you could get your hair styled and get new haircuts and new hair colors, but also Also, the introduction of colored contact lenses meant that you could change your eye color as well, which was a pretty big improvement. There are 32 different hairstyles that you could get in Animal Crossing New Leaf, which was a pretty big improvement from previous games, but also there were different color variations you could get as well. Another increase from previous games. This time around, there were 8 different natural hair colors that you could get, just different shades of browns, blondes, and red. But then there was also 4 intense colors you could have: red, green, bluish, and purplish, and 4 bright hair colors you could have, which were pink, lighter bluish, green, and white. Between all of this and the color customization with the eyes that were now added, for the first time ever, it was very unlikely 2 villagers would look the same if they've been playing the game long enough. You know, obviously you just both started the game at the same time, you might look the same. But outside of that, if you wanted to make your character look completely unique, you likely could do so. The eye colors came in green, light brown, black, blue, another shade of bluish green, and maybe it would have been cool to see more colors, but hey, this was a start. My only real complaint with Animal Crossing New Leaf is that if you didn't like the eyes you got when you did get your character, you couldn't change your eyes out overall, just change the color. So if you had like the mopey eyes or the ones that are just like the dots, and, you know, you're kind of stuck with them, you couldn't like change them to like the other types of eyes. And then of course when it came to custom designs that you could make for clothing, much like in the previous Animal Crossing games, it was included in this game also. However, you could also put your custom designs on like couches and furniture and whatnot, so a little extra thing you could do. Also, in Animal Crossing New Leaf, these pro designs would let you choose between having a long sleeve or a short sleeve shirt, which was pretty cool. Also, another interesting thing from Animal Crossing New Leaf was the ability to swim, which meant we needed wetsuits so we could go into the water, and that was neat. Now, of course, across every Animal Crossing game since the GameCube one that we talked about earlier, there was still a tanning mechanic like on the GameCube, though it was like toned way down. A completely different mechanic really from what it was in the original. It was almost unnoticeable, but I guess it was something that still existed, just very lightly across these games. But New Leaf would be the final game to have this like gentle tanning mechanic that definitely was not even very noticeable already at this point. So after the release of Animal Crossing New Leaf, we enter a little bit of an interesting era for Animal Crossing across the board as far as character customization goes, because it would be quite a while until we would see a release of another mainline game. We would get some interesting spin-offs along the way. Like for instance, there was obviously the first big appearance of Animal Crossing villagers in Super Smash Bros. 4 for the Wii U and 3DS, as the villager was introduced as a playable character, and he actually looks like the second generation version of the character. Yeah, I guess since Smash Bros. Was already in development simultaneously while Animal Crossing New Leaf was in development, even though Smash Bros. Came out later, the Animal Crossing character design resembles that of the older DS and Wii era villager. So I always found that was interesting, how we can still see short villager here, and a lot of the character design and inspiration also kind of merges aspects of Animal Crossing with the old game balloon fight from 1984. However, that wouldn't be the only new addition added to Animal Crossing for character customization technically, because we also would have the release of Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer for the Nintendo 3DS. And this game took a little bit of a different approach to how you could look, because in this game specifically, they actually made it where you could just straight up change any aspect of your character. There wasn't an unlock requirement, there weren't any questionnaires at the beginning. You could just make your character look how you wanted it to look. And for the first time in any Animal Crossing game, you could pick out your skin color, which was a long time coming. It finally came around officially in Happy Home Designer. I have maybe stated this incorrectly in the past, or I said New Horizons was the first game to let you do it. It was the first mainline game, but yeah, Happy Home Designer was technically the first game to let you do that. Not only that, though, there are a wide selection of different eyes that you can pick. I mean, there's still like hairstyle and hair color selection where you have to use a styling machine to change your hair color, but it was cool that you could just straight up see all the different options and then pick accordingly. Now, also in Animal Crossing character design updates and news, after the release of Happy Home Designer, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for Nintendo Switch would release, and that would have the villager return as a playable character, much like how he was in Super Smash Bros. 4, except this time around, there were alternate skins that you could put on for the character, and this time, finally, there were skins that had different literal skin colors as well, which was cool, because in the previous game, it didn't have that. I will say I was pretty surprised, though, that in Animal Crossing's representation here for Smash Bros. Ultimate, they didn't change the character to match the 3DS counterpart. They just stuck with the OG second-gen Animal Crossing villager, and it kind of has now grown on me where I wouldn't want them to change it nowadays, but I definitely had thought prior to the release that that would be something that they would end up doing. But yeah, they just kept the character short, and I think that it works for this character, so I really don't want to see it any different way. In 2014, Mario Kart 8 originally released, and we would later see DLC that introduced the Animal Crossing Crossing villagers into the game. Now, one thing I think is really funny is that these villagers use the updated 3rd generation villagers from Animal Crossing New Leaf. This is interesting and relevant later, so just trust me on that. But yeah, it was cool to see these characters represented here and they get to be added in. They were 2 separate characters originally when they released, but later on when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe would release and new characters would be added, they would be condensed into 1 character slot. But still, it was cool to see Animal Crossing in an Animal Crossing themed racetrack. Okay, the next major Animal Crossing game that we're getting ready to say RIP to is Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. It was still a spinoff, but it was a pretty full-fledged mobile experience for Animal Crossing fans, and this game was actually pretty groundbreaking for character customization, I would say. This game, along with Happy Home Designer, which we already talked about, kind of laid the foundation out for what customization would look like moving forward in Animal Crossing games. So yeah, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp gave you pretty much complete freedom at any point in time if you wanted to change the way that your face looked, your hair, your skin color, your eyes, all of that. Very easy to do. There was a pretty intuitive menu and an easy system for it. The game would even let you swap out your character's gender. So, you know, if you're feeling a little fluid one day, bam, all of a sudden you could switch to the other gender. This is a feature that actually becomes a little bit of a relevant point when we get into Animal Crossing New Horizons and the approach to different things like clothing and other customization with the character themselves. But I think with a mix of Happy Home Designer moving forward, it was a bigger initiative with Nintendo to just allow players to make their character look literally however they want and not have as many like restrictions around certain things or have some things locked behind certain design choices or whatnot. This ultimately, though, brings us on to Animal Crossing New Horizons, which technically to date is the most customization that you can have in any Animal Crossing game. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do. Right away at the beginning of the game, you kind of get to pick a base look for your Animal Crossing character, which is new for a mainline Animal Crossing game. Instead of having just genders with clothing that is associated with which gender you're wearing, you just have like a style that's like either a little bit more masculine or a little bit more feminine. But man, one of the coolest things that came to Animal Crossing New Horizons, bags. Yeah, essentially you can wear a bag now, which is really cool. They also made some additional big changes here, like you could now have multiple accessories on at the same time, depending on where on your actual face the accessory is worn. It used to be if you had glasses, you were pretty restricted as to like what else you could have on your head, and now you can wear glasses and a hat. Obviously now there's like way more customization added into how like clothing was approached. I mean, New Leaf already had a lot going on with being able to up the ante on your clothing decoration skills, and New Horizons adopts a lot of that, but now, you know, we're on the Switch. Things just look a lot clearer than the 3DS. So we got a bunch of hairstyles. We have a bunch of hair colors and, you know, things like you can change your eye color and whatnot, and you can do it all just by going to the mirror, which was really nice. There was no like requirement to use Shampoodle. She wasn't even in the game at the beginning. And then after the game launched, there were a couple of updates that added more things like new hairstyles. We don't need to talk about the space buns incident again, but when the Halloween update rolled around, we finally got something unexpected, but face paint, or I guess just like different color skin, where you could just completely go out there and throw on like pale white, green, blue, or purple as your skin color as well, which was a really cool addition. It wasn't something that needed to be there at launch, and it was something that was really cool for the timing as to when it was introduced into the game. So kudos to Nintendo for updating their game with something neat. It was one of the few times we actually got cool updates in Animal Crossing before they, you know, just completely abandoned it. But yeah, Animal Crossing New Horizons really highlights a lot of the best parts that had come into Animal Crossing over the years. Like now you could have like an undershirt and a jacket, you know, socks and shoes, just things that have been slowly added into the games over the years. Now you could show it all off. And then I don't know if this fully counts or if it's just an extension of the main thing that we've talked about here with New Horizons. But we also did get a phone in Animal Crossing in the form of the Nook phone, which you could customize as well. Though for whatever reason, I never figured out the steps to customize my Nook phone. Like it just was never a priority for me. The few times I tried to figure it out, I just couldn't and just said, whatever. But yeah, technically it was something you could customize. And ultimately that brings us to current day, where we're just kind of waiting around for the next big Animal Crossing game to be announced, hopefully sooner than later. But what did you think of the journey of the Animal Crossing character customization? Which game do you think was like the most iconic or pivotal for Animal Crossing as a brand? Do you still look to second generation and be like, yeah, that's Animal Crossing? Or do you like where it is now? Let me know in the comments down below. I am curious what the general consensus is. But yeah, make sure you're subscribed. Double check you are subscribed if you like Animal Crossing content from me. And we'll see you guys next time with a new video.